everyone. Welcome to Men on Fire. My name is Mike Aren, a former mechanic and engineer turned transformational teacher. And each week I'll deliver an inspiring message to help you excavate those repressed inner negative feelings and install new thoughts that will finally allow you to truly become the person you were born to be. Welcome to another episode of Men on Fire here on Soul Mechanic TV and Soul Mechanic Radio. I have a special guest for you today, but before we get to that, if you haven't already subscribed or rung that bell to get a hold of every episode that I put out, please do it now. It does help me reach a lot more people, and that is what these messages are all about. So if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe and ring that bell. Now, back to our special guest. His name is Alan Smith. You probably haven't heard of him, but he's making a big difference in a very, very difficult subject, and that is human trafficking. Now, I've heard about it, you've heard about it, and I've seen movies that involve human trafficking, but what actually is it, and how can we help? And especially as men, because men are the major contributors to human trafficking. So, I'm going to read you his introduction, and then we'll get started with the interview. Alan Smith serves as Executive Director for Saving Innocence, an anti-human trafficking, community-based organization focused on the recovery and restoration of child victims of sex trafficking. Fight for me are the words that Alan heard directly from a survivor of sex trafficking who was featured in Chapter 3 of his book, who was co-authored with Jessica Midkiff. The book is of the same title, Fight for Me. And Alan's unique view into this tragedy has given him a backstage pass to the horrific exploitation of children. As a man, Alan has seen how important his male voice is in combating this dark reality in our society. So the book is entitled Fight for Me, and you will see it a little bit later in the video. I'll hold it up for you. And also, it will be down in the description for a link if you'd like to get it. It's available on Kindle and also in print. So, let's get started and meet Alan. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Alan. I so much appreciate it, and I know you are so involved in this very passionate and sometimes difficult to talk about subject that we kind of all know is going on, but a lot of us, in day-to-day life aren't really exposed to it, so we don't know how big of a problem that it actually is. So I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and then maybe how you got involved in the whole thing to get things started.
Well, yeah, I would be honored to. Thank you so much for having me, Mike. It's great to be on with you. My name is Alan Smith, and I'm the executive director for a nonprofit agency based in Los Angeles called Saving Innocence. And Saving Innocence has been around 11 years, and I've been with them 6 years, so a little over half of that time, and honored to serve this team and do the work that we do. Married to my wife, Sharon, for wait for it, 37 years.
Wow, and, very good.
Two grown children, a daughter and a son. I was one of the lucky dads who got to parent from both sides of the aisle there with one son and one daughter, and loved both experiences, even though they were different, very different between the two.
Wonderful. Oh, yes. Yeah.
In fact, my 33-year-old daughter is downstairs right now working remotely. She doesn't live with us anymore, but she came because she had to do some appointments around where we live. So I get to see her today. So that's fun.
Oh, nice. Oh, excellent. Yes. Yeah. I had a sister, so we grew up in that same type thing, but she was 4 years older than me. So we probably wasn't as close as maybe we could have been if we were a little closer in age, but still, I saw that from the other side.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, in the Saving Innocence, we're in the space of the anti-human trafficking realm. Human trafficking, for your listeners, or maybe just learning about this particular crime that's happening. It's been referred to as the modern day slavery. It's the buying and selling of people, of humans, for the ownership of somebody else. And when we think about slavery in the traditional sense, we have all these images that we probably learned about in junior high and high school. And in a lot of ways, society has really progressed in a lot of different areas, but not in this realm. There's more people enslaved worldwide right now through human trafficking than at any time in human history.
Is that right? Wow.
So the people that count things and international organizations would say there's some 40 to 45 million slaves right now, today,
Holy smokes,
worldwide. And the two big buckets that are most thought of with human trafficking are labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And the federal definition uses three important words: force, fraud, or coercion. And so it's using one or more of those different ideas to compel someone to do something they don't want to do. And sometimes it looks like working. You've heard the term sweatshops, probably.
of course.
Sometimes it involves somebody working for little to no wages, 18 to 20 hours a day, doing something. And that might be labor trafficking. And then sex trafficking is compelling someone to have sex to buyers and some version of some twisted sexual experience. And they're required to do that because their owner, it sounds crass, but that's exactly what's happening. Their owner, their trafficker, is using force, fraud, or coercion, usually a combination of all three of those.
Right.
And when I say force, Mike, we're talking about violent, oftentimes, force. We're talking about lethal force. If one of these exploited people, oftentimes children, which is what we focus on as Saving Innocence, gets out of line, they literally could lose their life. We've had a number of those happenings over this last year. Yeah, tragic.
Yeah. It is, and I agree with you. When you think about slavery, the traditional picture, especially of the African folk that were brought over by ship, and they were men discovered they were more valuable than gold, basically, because they could sell them for higher prices. So, I mean, money is at the root of that, though, and it is today too, I'm sure.
100% economically driven crime. I mean, most crimes are somehow connected to finances, but this is 100%. It's 100% economically driven, preying upon vulnerable people, oftentimes coming from poverty related areas. And, it's been said that one sex trafficking victim could net as much as $250,000, $250,000 per year.
Really?
For their trafficker. That's cash. That's non-taxed.
Yeah, that's pretty lucrative for somebody that wants to do that.
It's a big number, and especially a lot of these traffickers will control more than one victim, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe.
Sure.
So now you've got these traffickers walking around with $1 million of cash in their pocket every year. So it's a big deal, and they don't take kindly to someone messing with their business model.
I bet you they don't. No, that's a real criminal activity at that point.
Yeah.
Too. And maybe you could explain the title of the book, "The Fight for Me." And I think there was a girl in the book named Rachel or whatever. Maybe talk a little bit about her and tell us about how you came upon that title.
Yeah, the book is entitled, you left the first word out, Men Fight for Me. We added the word men. And actually the title of the book, the working title for a long time was just Fight for Me. And then our book publisher and our consultant said, since the target audience is men, it's for everybody. And there's a lot of women reading it that are loving it and getting a lot out of it. But the target audience is men. Me with my male voice, challenging the male species to notice something, to look at this, to understand that we're the problem. And And through the course of that, the stories that are being brought to life by the survivors that I partnered with, I've co-authored with a woman named Jessica Midkiff, who I work with at Saving Innocence. And she's a survivor of trafficking from 11 to 21 years old. So she's seen it all. She tells her story courageously. You mentioned the word Rachel. Rachel is a friend and a partner in this work that inspired, actually, unofficially inspired this book, because Jessica, who I just mentioned, and Rachel were speaking at an event. They're in a panel discussion on a stage, and I was in the audience. There's a few other people there as well. And Rachel got to the point telling her story and the trauma that she had been through, and how so many of these victims turned survivors will say, I saw no way out. I didn't, like, I'm having suicidal thoughts. And she said on the stage, and kind of pierced my mind and my heart, she said, I could no longer fight for myself. I needed someone to fight for me.
Exactly.
And all the bells and whistles started going off in my head, because what I had learned working at Saving Innocence was most of the buyers are men. Most of the sellers and the traffickers are men. We men, those of you men that are listening right now, we are the problem. We have either actively caused this crime to happen by actually purchasing sex, or the other category is we haven't done that, but we've passively let all of this happen, the fastest growing crime in the world. We've let it happen right under our noses. Maybe we saw it, maybe we didn't see it, but it's happening. And so it's our job to step in, get off the sidelines, get into this fight, and be leaders in our community and put an end to this. So when Rachel said, I needed someone to fight for me, most men are kind of wired as protectors and, fighters, maybe figuratively, if not literally.
Right.
And so I'm no different. I don't know if this is on video or not right now, but you're going to see some movie posters behind me. Rocky, Gladiator, Braveheart. And I love those movies, as a lot of men do. And I took Rachel saying that as she was speaking to me, because what usually happens when I go to events, there's hardly any men in the room, which is fine. There's a lot of great, strong, passionate women that are doing a great work, anti-trafficking work. But the biggest part of this problem is men. And so there needs to be more men stepping up and championing this cause and fighting for the many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of young survivors out there that have lost the will to fight, and they need someone to fight for them. And so that was kind of the impetus of the book. Men Fight for Me. Again, it's for everybody. And Jessica and Rachel, among others, tell their stories and bring it to life. 80% of the book is not, you don't have to be a man or a woman, doesn't matter. It's just massively educational on what's happening, breaking it down, what is happening, what isn't happening. But there's a good 20%. And I say in the book, I'm unapologetically speaking to my men right now and challenging us to be better and live better and see things that you haven't seen before and get involved in the anti-trafficking space. And it's affecting children. The average age of entry is 11 or 12 or 13 years old. It's
crazy to even think of that, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah. Our youngest kiddo at Saving Innocence, she's now just turned 11, but we met her when she was 7.
Unbelievable.
Think about that. Moms and dads out there listening right now, a lot of you have children. You might have a child that's 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 years old right now. Think about that child being forced, fraud or coercion, being forced to sleep with, have sex with a dozen partners every single day.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
Can't even fathom that. And is it not true that some of the traffickers, I guess we could call them, they claim ownership of them and they brand them and all those sorts of things too?
No, they absolutely do. They absolutely claim ownership. The young victims aren't allowed to decide anything. They're not allowed to speak back. They're not even really allowed to look at them in the eye. They're told everything what they're going to do. They're literally a slave, and they do brand them in the form of tattoos, and they'll tattoo their nickname or their call sign, whatever the trafficker goes by, and they'll tattoo that on all over their body in a visible space, oftentimes the neck or even the face, other parts of the body, to signify ownership. So if I've got relatives in the state of Texas, and they own some cows, some cattle, and they put the brand, their
Right.
family name
Right.
on the butt of the cow,
Sure.
and nobody objects to that because it's a subhuman. The
Hmm.
cow is not a human being; it's an animal, and it's okay to brand that cow and own that cow. But if the wind blows the fence down and the cow wanders off, they're going to know who to return it to, the owner of the property.
Exactly.
Well, this is the exact same thing that's happening with human beings right now in our midst on a worldwide epidemic, is that there are those that, through their own brokenness and twisted view of the world, feel like they can claim ownership over
Hmm.
a young, vulnerable person, and they brand them in case they wander off. They'll know who to return them to.
Yeah.
It's it's
It,
it's just it's appalling.
it is appalling and disgusting. Um, Now, I've seen movies, and I don't know how accurate of a depiction it is, but people coming across on in containers, from other countries to either the states or wherever else they want to go to, where their traffickers need more children or adults even. Um, so that's kind of the picture you get in your mind too, and you know it exists, but nowhere near to the scale that you've been talking about. So it's like, well, that can't be too huge of a problem. I personally don't know anybody involved in that. I don't know any of my friends would even think about having sex with somebody underage. So you get kind of lulled in that false sense of security that, well, there's probably only a few people here and there. But I mean, even as evidence that's come up in many times now, in religious organizations, like, I don't want to single anybody out, but the Catholic Church in particular, with the way some of the priests and stuff sexually abuse some of their young children too, and nobody really knew that was really going on much, except for maybe some insiders until not that recently, maybe in the last 15, 20 years. So there's things that happen that we have no idea about. And it's great that you're bringing that to light. And I'm supposing that it's probably a bigger issue in United States than it is Canada, given the population difference and all that sort of thing. Do you have any idea of how much of an issue it is in Panama, or sorry, Canada?
It's not a space that I've focused on, obviously, and so
Yep, yep.
I'm not sure.
I didn't know if you ran into any numbers somewhere along the line, or
What I can guarantee you, just based on what I know, is that it's sex trafficking is happening all throughout Canada,
Mhm.
and it'll be concentrated in kind of your more urban settings in the bigger cities for
of
sure.
course. Yep.
In our country, there's a national hotline run by the Polaris Project, and they get tips and calls from all over the country, and their stats are staggering. It's in all 50 of our states. I mean, I don't know if it's truly in every single zip code, which, I don't know how familiar you are with our zip code system, but you
Yep.
could say it's in basically every state and every zip code. And there's a higher concentration wherever there's entertainment, wherever there's money, wherever there's people, predominantly men. The sex industry is going to be flourishing.
Mhm.
So, and certainly in your bigger cities, where there's professional sports teams and there's business and there's computer shows or whatever, there's going to be a percentage of men mostly
Mhm.
that they're going to want to add that to their entertainment, especially if they're traveling.
Yes.
But don't think that it's not out in the rural parts too, to a lesser degree.
Oh no,
Um,
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
yeah, it's an incredibly lucrative business model. It's a if you talk about it in business terms, which is tragic that we're even doing it, but that's what it is. It's a
Mhm.
business,
Absolutely.
but it's a renewable source of income, almost like a passive income. Like if you're a drug dealer or a arms dealer, you sell that gun or that bag of drugs one time, then you have to go back and get another one and sell that one again. But if you own a human for the purposes of sex, you can sell that person 10, 12, 15, or 20 times every single day.
Yeah.
The same person.
Yeah. Just I can't fathom that, just being abused like that and used like that. And when that happens, like where does their sense of self-worth go to? I mean, it must be non-existent.
It gets absolutely obliterated. And that when we meet these children, usually they're a lot of 14, 15, and 16-year-olds. And then the slightly older survivors that come to work on our staff, even, there's such a rebuilding process. They've been torn down. They've been manipulated. They've been brainwashed. They've been, there's something that happens to the human spirit when you're not treated like a human.
Mm-hmm.
You begin to believe the lies that are being told.
Definitely.
And that's some of what Rachel said. I could no longer fight for myself. And she said right before that, I began to believe what they were telling me, how dirty I was and how shameful and how ugly I was and all those things. And you just begin to believe that. My co-author, Jessica, when she's telling her story in the book, right in the beginning of it, she says, and, I don't want to be too crass here, but in her words, she says, I was called bitch so many times, I literally began to think that was my name. I forgot what my name was.
Exactly.
You're just referred to in a certain way through certain language, and pretty soon that's your world.
That's it. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I do life coaching too, and I'm always on a more of spiritual side of things, and we our behaviors, even if we bring awareness, like you're really raising awareness in a lot of the things you do, and your mission to raise the awareness for this, which you should be commended for, but how do we change their behaviors? Because we have thoughts create actions that we do, and then when we repeat these actions, they create habits, and then these habits become beliefs that we have. If you do something over and over and over again, and you're used to doing it, then whenever that topic comes up that you need to do it again, well, you go back to the habit that's worked for you. So that becomes a belief. So that I can just resort to that, and I believe I can do that. So then the belief becomes a behavior, and then you're constantly going back to that behavior again. So it just makes me wonder how. Obviously, many of these traffickers should be behind bars, but is there some way to even rehabilitate that? How unloved must that person feel, and have such lack of self-respect and dignity and integrity in themselves that they even want to do this?
No, you're raising a really excellent point. It's very insightful because kind of the sort of the theme of the book is not a man shaming. I'm calling out men as a fellow man. We're the problem. But it's not a man bashing, man shaming. It's like, come with me on this journey that I'm on, and I'm going to introduce you to some people along the way. And there's going to be call to action, many of them throughout the book. But one of those people I'm introducing in the book, there's a chapter on specifically the traffickers. Like, who are they? What's going on? Why are they doing this? And I sat down with a former trafficker and kind of interviewed him for this book, and it's in there. And he said some really interesting things, some challenging things. And he began to tell me about his childhood.
Right.
He talked about the fact that his dad wasn't involved anywhere. His mom was addicted to something. For a while, they were homeless and living in a car. He was forced as a young child to go out and sell marijuana to make money for the family. He saw the older kids in the neighborhood selling drugs and selling girls, and they were making money. And he said something very interesting to me. He said, I wasn't a bad person. I needed to survive. And that's an interesting word, because we've heard that from our survivors. They're called survivors oftentimes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're saying, like, every single day, I could die today. Like, I have to do what I have to do to not die today. It's survival. And I'm hearing the same things, and the same conditions that produce the vulnerable child that becomes trafficked is producing the vulnerable male child oftentimes to become a trafficker. It's like the same environment. And I talk about this in the book, and I thought, I don't know that I've ever actually been in a true survival situation. I didn't I didn't go into the military. I didn't become a cop or a fireman on a burning building where like I literally the next decision I make, I could live or die. That was never my existence. But these trafficking survivors and traffickers, that's exactly been their existence as an early child as they began to learn to interpret the world coming at them. It's based on survival. Like,
No,
that's an interesting, powerful concept.
well, it is, and I mean, I was in the military, but luckily enough, we never had to do what's going on in Ukraine right now. But you're put into scenarios for training bases
Right.
to see what it's like to actually be in those scenarios.
Yeah.
But you still know at the back of your mind that it's training, and yeah, you might get hurt, you might get injured, but for the most part, your safety is still being thought of for a lot of that aspect of the training, right? And the I just don't. I guess have you ever heard of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Where
Yeah.
the bottom of the triangle is like survival, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the top is being an ascending being, basically very spiritually oriented, and that's where your mind is, and you're full of love and forgiveness and all those things. But you can't get there until you get out of that survival mode, because when you're in survival mode,
Yeah.
you need to eat, you need to drink, you need to just make it through the day to the next day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like many wild animals are, pretty much. Similar to thing there. So if you're locked in that, you can't develop your mind and become change your behaviors. So just like he was saying, he had to survive, right? So it's
And
it's
that other scenario of that young soldier who's joined the military, not only are they're old enough to make sound decisions and process it, that's one. Two, they're provided a ton of training to how to survive it. Three, they're provided a lot of equipment and best practices for how to do it. They got a helmet and weapons, and maybe most importantly, they're part of a unit, a platoon. They got other people helping to ensure their survival on the battlefield.
Absolutely, yeah.
You talk about a child. The child has none of those things getting pulled into this survival situation. They have no life experience. Their brain isn't mature enough to process it. They don't have any tools, and there's nobody fighting for them. There's nobody even oftentimes even looking for them. And that's a tactic of the traffickers. They isolate, they separate. They separate their victims from their support systems, and they become the support system for that child. And for that young child who can't really tell the difference, it's just a big ball of confusion and chaos and survival. It's incredible.
Well, you wonder sometimes too why abused women or even men, it can be the scenario in a relationship, and they're getting abused. Well, why didn't you just leave? Well, it's a similar thing, but in a similar vein, not the same thing. I mean, I think this is much more horrendous with the children, but it's a similar thought pattern too, right?
Well, and for so many of these victims, they've experienced an early childhood abuse, oftentimes a sexual abuse as a young child, and oftentimes their home has been abusive by the people that were supposed to protect them and take care of them, and so that the whole idea of why didn't you just leave? Well, in some ways, in a weird, twisted way, the known abuse and chaos and in their current abusive situation in their mind is better than and more attractive than the unknown abuse. Like, what could happen if I left the situation? I could get murdered tonight out on the street. There's no safe home for me to go back to.
No.
And so they learn their coping mechanisms to stay in that abusive, ugly situation because in their mind, it's better than the alternative.
Yes. Well, it was I guess a couple of months ago, I did a podcast with a gentleman that is a porn abstinence coach. Matt Sinkovich is his name. And he coaches people, and men primarily, because again, the men is the biggest market for that, to help them get out of that recurring porn scenario where they constantly either crave it or need it or whatever the release is there. finding that it hurts their relationships. Some of them are married, but then they don't want to have sex with their wife anymore, or they're afraid to, or whatever. Then they feel probably a little bit shameful at times too. But how much does the porn industry take, or part of this thing too? Like, do some of the young kids, like I'm thinking, if I was a business person in that trafficking scenario, could you not get the young children to film them and make more money on a porn site or something like that? I don't know, but is that part of it too, or how does that relate to the system?
Yeah, pornography very much is related to, certainly. Well, and let me stop for a minute. Trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking is like one of the big ugly weeds growing out of this exploitive soil. We have an exploitive culture that's exploiting and demeaning people, usually women. One of those other weeds is pornography, and they're related. They're in the same garden. And pornography is an on-ramp to future buyers and future victims. It
I like that terminology, on-ramp.
Yeah. The average age of first exposure, I've heard, is 8 or 9 years old. So you have a young brain that's not capable to process what's going on. And then with the benefit of all the advanced neuroscience, it literally is rewiring the brain. And the way someone sort of takes in the world and processes things like this. And it's telling young buyers, okay, this is what sex looks like, future buyers. It basically, it's an abusive sexual situation. It's telling young future traffickers, oh, I could sell that. It's just creating this on-ramp to the whole exploitation and degradation, demeaning of women and children primarily. The thing with pornography, and this comes up pretty regularly, we've had trafficking victims, like the ones that we're talking about, being owned and controlled, be forced to go into a room or a set, be raped over and over again. Someone's filming it.
Yes.
And that gets put on a pornography website.
Right.
One of our victims in the book, I quote her as saying, this happened to her. And every time someone's watching that porn video, they're watching me being raped, and there's millions of views on it.
Well, that's what I mean. They don't know that, but that's
right.
How they're attracted to. Why would you want to watch a young child being molested or having sex anyway? But still, even though they're watching that, and for whatever reason that's satisfying, whatever that is for them, but they don't really know the scenario behind it either, right?
There's no way of knowing. On your basic porn video, there's no disclaimer. There's no little seal or little label that says,
exactly.
Consensual, and then even to take it one step further, I've got a friend who's releasing a documentary on pornography. It'll come out sometime later this year, I think. He spent 5 years, 6 years interviewing everybody. And he said something very chilling to me. And he said, not some or many, but most of the women you see in pornography are there experiencing some form of coercion, in some ways trafficking. Something has happened where they don't want to be doing what's happening right there, the way it's happening, but they can't get out. And it's like, okay, now I'm no lawyer. You probably have some lawyers listening, but I'm pretty sure non-consensual sex is called rape.
Yes.
So they should change the name of pornography and put some kind of a tagline, just call it a crime scene. Because the vast majority of the people you're looking at, fellas, don't want to be there. And are we going to get some kind of enjoyment or some kind of pleasure? We're going to pay either or put our own credit card in there, or we're going to some place for free, but they're monetizing your clicks and your eyeballs. You're literally funding rape. You're literally enjoying and funding sexual abuse and rape on the camera. So this is part of my message. And we talk about that in the book. It's not a major part of the book, but it's like, this is one of the things where we got to have an honest conversation with, the men out there. And women use porn too, but again, my lane is men. I'm a man. I can speak to men. We got to have an honest conversation and say, we got to be better than this. If you need some help, get some help. Absolutely. But we have to walk away from this because people are literally being abused and raped on camera for your enjoyment. And if that doesn't strike you as really wrong and really upside down and unjust and gross, then you have a bigger problem than even the porn.
Well, yeah, I mean they're closely related. I think, like you said, an on ramp to just like using a light drug to get into something harder.
Yeah.
It doesn't always lead there, but many times it does, doesn't it?
Well, and you know how addiction works, whether it's a chemical, a drug, an alcohol, whatever, you always need a little bit more to achieve the same high at some point. And that's the same with sexual addiction. You always need a little bit more in order to achieve that same high, whatever that high is for you. And usually what that means in trafficking and sexual abuse is it usually means younger and more violent situations for sex addicts. And that's where children come into play. They're for sale. Get them on the internet, maybe on the street corner, depending where you live. And it's that person that's really turned over that part of his soul, and they've gone down this path to use and abuse a minor who, of course, doesn't want to be there for your own addiction. And that's, we're just trying to rattle the cages of society. You can't fix something unless you know about it. How are you gonna? We can't hold men accountable to fix something if they didn't know that it happened. And so
that's right. Yep.
We humbly submit this book. And by the way, I don't know if we mentioned this. We've created a little website called fightforme.net. And the book lives there. It's for sale on Amazon. You go right to Amazon if you want, but go to fightforme.net. And these survivors that are speaking into the book, their links are there. Some of them have written books and their websites. Check it out. There's a YouTube channel connected there. We're having conversations like this with people that are in the book and other people.
Nice.
So I'd say step one is get a little more educated on what all this is. And proceeds of the book are benefiting sex trafficking survivors. There's 6 women that give their story in their life in the book, and they all get a piece of whatever proceeds there might be. So buy a case of these books and give them out to everybody you know. Give them to every man you know.
That's
right. The women, the wives and girlfriends will love it too. I promise you that. But we need to get this book in the hands of every man in the world. Let's have big goals, because this is something that doesn't need to be limited or shrunk a little bit. It needs to go away completely. And we have the power to do it, men, because guess what? We're the problem.
That's right. That's right. Definitely. Yeah, you're right. So much right about the addiction thing. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're addicted to. It's funny how the brain works, right? You need to have a little bit more of what the body doesn't really want in order to satisfy that thing, that chemical rush or whatever happens in the brain, and then afterwards you feel like crap. So you don't really want it. The body doesn't really want it. Most of those addictions aren't the greatest for the body either. Yeah. But yet we do it. And
then we get up and do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. And so what can most guys, let's say they read the book and all that sort of thing, what can they do to, especially male listeners, do to help this scenario and regarding the demand for the sexual exploitation of young people? Is there something that you can think of that they could do, quite quickly, or something to just spread the word, or is there more they can do?
We go through that actually in great detail in the book, and there's an appendix full of things. There's something like 12 things you can do today, do it right now. Nice. There's also a whole chapter in chapter 8 called Looking in the Mirror. And I walk through, there's about a dozen kind of big picture, macro societal kinds of things that we as a society have to do. And then there's the micro view, where here are the things that you can do. And then I have the last one is the ultimate solution. And I say, I'm so bold by saying I have the ultimate solution. And spoiler alert, men, it starts with us. And we are the ultimate solution because we're the ultimate problem.
Exactly.
And so, there's a lot of ways to answer that. And I would just challenge and encourage our men that are listening right now. And you wives or girlfriends, forward this podcast to the men in your life. Start by looking in the mirror and sync up your life, mind, heart, thoughts with a non-exploitive culture, a non-exploitive world that we want to leave for our children and our grandchildren.
Exactly.
And when you get your own house in order, especially if you have kids, your young sons desperately need to see a trusted male that they're close to, and you are it, Dad. They're watching you. They want to know how you treat your wife. How do you talk to your wife? Do you show your wife appropriate affection and encouragement in their presence? How do you talk to the female waitress at the restaurant? What kinds of TV shows and music do you allow into your home? Does that all sync up with a man who's giving honor, giving respect to women, or is it something different? that your young sons need to see that. They're taking your cues from you. Here's how you treat women, and here's how you view the world. And your young daughters, same thing. They desperately need to understand what they can and should expect from a future boyfriend or a future husband.
I agree.
And she's going to get that from you. How do you think about, talk about, treat women? How do you treat her as your daughter? Mm-hmm. Those things are massive. And we get enough men doing those things, and then grab in your community around you. Grab 2 or 3 or 4 buddies. Get this book. Have a little book club with it. Do father-son outings, father-daughter outings. All those kinds of things are going to be ultimately what we need to do. We need to get a lot of people doing that. Now, in the meantime, find a local anti-trafficking organization. Become a donor. Become a monthly donor. Mm-hmm. Call them up. Ask them what they need. Ask them. Find out how many staff they have. If 5 staff, 10 staff, 20 staff, whatever it is. Next time you go to the store, buy a $20 Starbucks gift card for as many staff as they have, or whatever gift card. Mm-hmm. Send it to them and say, we're cheering you on. Thanks for your hard work. They don't even know you yet. And those staff members, whoa, someone notices our work. They're thankful for our work. That'll go a long way. That'll go more than $20. I promise you.
Yeah, that little bit of appreciation. Yeah. It's like a smile. Just a small thing can go so far. You know, and help people on their do their mission. And keep motivated. Yeah. And does not think that, we're not making a difference. Yeah. And I know you touched on a little bit about that just recently, and I was wondering, you also talked about, I think, the authentic male. And I know when coaching, I talk a lot about integrity, which goes right along with that. But I find that, as far as integrity goes, many people think, well, what's integrity? Well, do you have any integrity? Oh, yeah, no, they asked me to come at that certain time and I was there. Oh, yeah, I picked up that thing at the store that the wife asked me to do. So they think they think integrity is doing what other people expect of you or did. I had the integrity to actually do that. But I think it's more integrity with yourself. Like, I use the example of years ago, I pulled up in the parking lot at the gym, and then I decided I didn't even want to go in. So I drove away. But I was supposed to have that workout that day, right? So I didn't have integrity with myself. And that's where it begins. When you do what you want to do, that you need to do in order to be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. So integrity begins with you. The self-respect begins with you. The authenticity begins with you. So I know the definition maybe you have for an authentic male is, if you could just go over that with us a little bit.
Yeah, that's the tagline in the book, the role of authentic masculinity in ending sexual exploitation and trafficking. That's actually made the cover of the book. Mm-hmm. And that's to reinforce the idea to men. We have a role to play. There's a role for you. There's a job for you, men. And what it is, we defined an authentic male. And there's a lot of different versions of this that you could choose, but I go into it in the book and talked about something that we did with my son, a couple of buddies of mine and their sons. When they started out about 5 years old, we started a kind of a father-son thing. Mm-hmm. And job number 1 was for us to give the gift of clarity, I call it. There's no agreed upon definition of what is a man? What makes a man? What's a real man? Mm-hmm. Is it the first time they have sex? Does that make him a man? The popular song lyrics might say that. Is it an age? Are you 18 or 21 or you got married? What is it? Nobody knows. So we decided, let's fix that. So we came up with a 4-pronged definition that we taught our boys, and we continue to celebrate it every time we saw it and give little lessons and go see movies that reinforced it. We just had this running conversation their entire adolescence. And pillar number 1 is he accepts responsibility. An authentic, powerful, helpful man, the kind of man that brings freedom, not oppression to the world, the kind that respects women and his fellow man. He accepts his responsibilities. He does what he says he's going to do, kind of like what you're just talking about. Mm-hmm. And there are those responsibilities that are directly, clearly on us to fulfill my duties, my job duty, or whatever it might be. But an authentic man who's really stepping into it is going to step into bigger responsibilities for maybe his community, maybe the world, maybe a fight, maybe your child's nowhere near, you don't even have a child, but maybe they're not a trafficking victim.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if you were to accept the responsibility? No, I'm going to fight for those over there. That's on me. I'm a man. I'm going to get into that fight. So that's pillar number one. Two, he leads courageously. A courageous leader stepping into battle, not shying away from hard conversations. He may be a little nervous about it, but he fights through it anyway. That's what courage is. So an authentic man is accepting his responsibilities. He's leading courageously, and it starts with his own self. Lead himself, lead his family, lead his neighborhood, lead his community. Give leadership in the community that you're in, men. This country and this world is sorely missing strong, courageous, appropriate, healthy leaders.
I agree.
Three, he lives a life of service. He's not here to take, he's here to give. He's serving, again, it starts in the home, the broken record here. It starts with his wife and his children. He's serving them. He's still the dad, but he's an attitude of service, his neighbors, his community, the world. He's serving, not taking, not being served. He's serving. And then four is getting at to what you mentioned a little bit ago, kind of with the integrity piece. It is, he understands that who he is more important than what he does. So you can do all the chat you want, all the talk you want. You can step into whatever profession you want, and that's fine. But underneath the surface is more important than anything that you do. Who you are as a person, as a man, who you are with your character, your integrity, your honesty, your follow through. All those things are a little more abstract at times, but we wanted our boys to know that we're going to be paying attention to the internal more than the external. So that's our definition of authentic masculinity. It's the man who's living those out and practicing those things every single day as much as possible. He's going to fall and stumble. That's great. Get back up, but pursue those things. Now, that's a world I want to live in. Could you imagine if we had the majority of men alive today were accepting all their responsibilities, they're giving courageous leadership, they were serving the world, and they focus on the internal, not the external? That's a world I want to live in.
That would be a totally different world.
There's no room for trafficking, human trafficking, because men who are living like that wouldn't allow it to happen. We'd say, no, not on my watch.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for that. Like that was awesome. That was awesome. And I know the guys listening, they will subscribe to that. Yeah. And when you talked about service, I mean, I totally believe in that. I think that we need to add more value than we take. Yeah. If we do, we'll be successful at whatever we do. But I often go back to Muhammad Ali's quote, actually. I don't know if you've heard it before, but service to others is the rent we pay for our room here on earth. And I thought
that's a great quote. I haven't heard that before.
In my mind, we've all had our opinions of Muhammad Ali. In my mind, I think he was a great individual who stood up for a lot in his life. And I love that quote from him. So
I just recently did a podcast, an Instagram live with his daughter, Layla Ali, actually talking about this book.
Wild. Nice.
Yeah. So she was using her platform to have this conversation, which was really, really cool.
Wonderful. I bet. Wow. That is just awesome. And I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I will put everything in the description down below the video on YouTube, and it'll also be talked about in the audio-only podcast on Men on Fire Radio. But where can we get the book again, and how can we actually support Saving Innocence if we would like to?
That's fantastic. The book is for sale on Amazon. You can go to Amazon like everybody else in the world does on a regular basis, and you can type in Men Fight For Me. But I want to add one more step, if I could. Go to fightforme.net, the little website that we created, and there's some background on the book. As I mentioned earlier, the various survivors that have contributed to the book. There's links to what they're doing. There's other resources. There's a kind of a pornography resource, and there's a resource that was created by one of these survivors that all the teens can watch, got risk factors of what's happening out there. Helps have an important conversation with your kids, mom and dad. And then this YouTube channel. So go to fightforme.net. There's a link to Amazon there. Buy the book, buy as many as you can, give them around to everybody. And then you can go to savinginnocence.org. That's the website of the agency that I lead. And you can become a little donor if you want. I would say everybody listening should become a regular donor to a trafficking effort, anti-trafficking effort. Just put that on your books, on your budget.
Yeah.
If you don't have one you already know of, go to savinginnocence.org. We'll take you with open arms. Become a monthly donor. You can do it right there. Whatever amount is the right amount for you. And follow us on social media at Saving Innocence, and see what we're doing, and retweet and refollow and reshare and all those things that you do on social media. And there's some videos to watch there. You can learn, more about the issue, get more involved in that way. I'll say also we have social media around this book called at Fight For Me Book on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook at Fight For Me Book. So just get involved. And if there's other organizations, and there's probably some Canadian-based organizations, I'm sure, I'm not familiar with them actually, get involved with Canadian anti-trafficking efforts. Do something. Pick it. There's a million things you could do. Pick one. Do one. And then maybe a second one. Just do something. Get off the couch. Get off the couch and do something.
Excellent.
There's a bunch of children that are saying, "I need someone to fight for me." You're gonna keep walking and turn away from that? I can't.
No, that's right. And you know what? I was gonna say this off the air after we cut away, but you're one rockin' dude, man, and you've got that Rocky poster behind you, and that's you. Like, that's you. That's I really, really appreciate it, what you're doing, and what you're able to put together and work as hard as you do. And I want all my listeners to check you out, buy the book, and check out the all the organizations that you mentioned, and get involved. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on Men on Fire today, because you're a shining example of what men, fathers can do when they put their mind to it. And that's all we have to do.
Well, thanks so much for those kind words, Mike, and I appreciate you shining your flashlight, your spotlight on this issue and inviting me on. I really appreciate that. And we have to keep this conversation alive, and we have to be better as a people, as humanity. And I want to help, and I know you want to help, and so we just need a bunch of other men to step in and say, "I'm in. Let's do this." Exactly.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show today, Alan. I really much appreciate it, and hopefully you'll get a lot of people buying that book now and doing things that they know they need to do. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to stay in touch with you as well in the moving along in the future. So
sounds good. I appreciate it.
Thank you again, Alan, and I appreciate it.
Like,
okay, bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. As always, keep what feels good and dump what doesn't. And remember, live without judgment, give without expectation, and love for no reason. Follow those 3 simple expressions, and you'll be well on your way to an inspirational, intentional, and successful life. Until next time, you're the one.